The integrator is just a meeting facilitator. So why can't I get an assistant or maybe an AI bot or something like that? Ben's chuckling. He's heard that one before, right?
They just run the level 10s.
Just run the level 10s. Yeah. So what's wrong here? And I'm going to let Svi go into this a little bit more. And there's a little bit of a misconception about the depth of the integrator role. Absolutely. They're the EOS champion. They're making sure that those meetings are running. And that's great. But if all that your integrator is doing is facilitating your level 10 meetings, you have a meeting facilitator. Congratulations. That's a very worthwhile investment for the most important meeting of your week. You do not have an integrator. You are overpaying for what that role can truly be. So again, meeting facilitation of the level 10s, fantastic. But let's talk about the true depth of the role. And this is where it may get interesting if you're a visionary who is sitting in that integrator seat, because it does come down a lot of the times to capacity. We've talked about, a lot of you know the term fractional integrator. And a lot of people think of that term as someone who's coming from the outside to serve for a day or two a week. And that certainly is one way that someone can be a fractional integrator. The other way that fractional integrators show up is when there's a visionary who is sitting in the integrator's seat, who is also sitting in the implementer's seat, who is also the head of sales. Guess what? Capacity-wise, he or she is going real shallow on that role. And this role can be such a kick-ass role if you allow it to be. So Svi, do you want to go into the true depth?
So the integrator obviously is the one who has to be able to do, as I said, the unique ability. As visionaries and owners, you have a unique ability, but a lot of it, as I know that we all think like, oh, I could do all that stuff. I know people who keep claiming that after all these years, but it's very, very difficult. When we say to beat the drum or the trains run on time, like the fact that you were able to jump in and shut me up in the middle of my thing.
I've done it before. We've worked together many times.
Again,
yeah.
But that means that we're accountable to the time and respecting everybody else and all the different pieces that the integrators do. And that's very hard for visionaries and guys like me. Like, I can tell you 30 more stories and just keep talking.
Okay, wrap it up. Come on.
Exactly. But I want to make one other very important point that's beyond what's over here, is that you have to also realize, as a visionary or an owner, the integrator is not the bad cop. They all think like, oh, I'm the visionary, I'm the culture guy. Like, I get to like make a good culture and give everybody hugs and high fives and, you know, do all that stuff. And the integrator is supposed to be like, keep them accountable. They are not the bad cop. That's not what it is supposed to be. This is like two parents kind of working together.
It's also not your lemming.
Oh,
it's not just
exactly.
a, hey, go do this, go do this,
They're
go do this.
They're not your personal assistant.
They're not your assistant. Again, you are the gas pedal, right? You could get someone who is a brick to your gas pedal and you can go super fast, and I bet it's gonna be super fun, but you may go the wrong direction, you may crash.
Right.
And so allow your integrator to do all these things. Allow them to push back a little bit. Allow them to make sure that things get to the finish line. Allow them to complete you. We talked about that book, Second in Command. You wanna find someone who is uniquely paired to you, to your company at this moment in time and where you want to go.
But different in the regard that I've even heard people are like, oh, the integrator is like the chief of staff, which means like, I'm the president, I get to decide everything, I get to do whatever I want, and they're gonna just carry out the execution, like you wave a wand and they just go do stuff, and that's not a very healthy relationship. It often won't work. That's why, not getting into the politics, but that's why it doesn't often work in some of our governments, because that's not the way. There is really there's one person trying to do their own thing. It doesn't always work that way. Yeah. They have to be a team. They have to listen to each other.
And the integrator loves that like weird, funky, messy middle between living in the here and now and the nitty gritty and looking far down the football field. So they're going to keep that facilitation of conversation going, making sure that people are talking, being as effective as possible. And that steady drumbeat, it's real. We all have had those moments where you have a quarterly and you're like, let's go, we're going to go do this. And then 2 days later, someone quits. Something like that happens, or your biggest customer pull. Everything looks great on paper, and then again, people make it complicated. So your integrator is the one who is there, and they're your advocate if you give them enough time to do it right.
Correct.
So we're going to, again, keeping in mind that all of this is a practice. No one's perfect. I am not perfect.
No.
Yes. Just ask my husband. Integrators. What could you be doing a little bit better? Visionaries as integrators. What could you be doing a little better? We all have room to grow. Okay, so just take a quiet minute here. Think about it. And share it. Share it with somebody who's going to keep you accountable. Because we all have room to grow in this practice.
Right. Don't be afraid to be vulnerable. And that's where real growth is going to come from. It's going to feel painful in the beginning. But that means you're growing. If you're too afraid to face that truth, that readiness factor, like we said, then you're going to kind of get stuck there. You're never really going to get to that next level. And you're going to wonder why. And very often we're going to blame everybody else, the integrator's fault. Lean into it. Don't be afraid of saying, that's why you're here, to learn, to open up your mind and say, okay, maybe I can do all of this. Lean into it. Go slow as you need to go. As Simon Sinek goes, which she quoted earlier, great book, The Infinite Game. There's no end. In a baseball game, there's 9 innings and it's over. There's no end in the business. The goal is to stay in the game, which means go slow as you need to go, but keep moving down that path.
Yeah, love it. All right, so again, this is nothing new to you. You're like, yeah, I know that. But when you see it through a fresh lens, you're going to pick up something, some area of improvement. And when you think about these 3 unique roles, it's hard to have one person fill them completely when it comes to G, W, and C. All right, so
one idea on that. I wanted to just stress an idea because I see this happen a lot. They're like, oh, that's your role, you go do it. And they very much create like these barriers. Obviously, we understand accountability. We talk about accountability chart, we teach accountability. Accountability means that person is accountable to get us all the way to the finish line. It doesn't mean that they're the ones responsible. Notice there's a big difference between the words accountability and responsibility. They're not the same. You could be accountable for something, but not actually the one that's doing the actual tasks. I always like to think of like a quarterback, right? And he's accountable to get us into the end zone. He's not the one carrying the ball. It depends on which team you're looking at, right? Some of them love to run with the ball, but most of them, their job is to pass the ball. They're accountable to figure out everything we need to go to get to that finish line. Everybody in these sections have their area of accountability, which means they have to take the ownership of what's going on, but you gotta lean into it, work with each other, reflect on each other's weaknesses and strengths in order to kind of work as one team together. Accountable means that guy's sitting in the driver's seat, but the rest of you are still in the car. You're sitting in the passenger seat. It's not like, oh, well, drive your own car. That's not what it is. Yeah. When you get the right people in those right seats, that's where magic starts to happen. Easy? Not in a million years. Simple? If you will really be honest with yourself, you'll break it down and see it is pretty simple, and that's what this journey is really all about.